Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bookish Babbles, the podcast where we reread our favorite books and chat about them. I'm your host, Alyson, and without further ado, let's get started. Welcome to episode 2 of Bookish Babbles. Today, we're talking about chapters 4 to 6 of The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. Woo! So I hope we're back to our regularly scheduled programming. I hope you enjoyed the bonus unplanned episode. But yeah, now we're back to chatting about the actual book. Before we get started, I just wanted to share some exciting news with everyone. In case you hadn't heard, we got some news from Lionsgate. They confirmed that they're aiming to start filming the Ballad movie this summer. Yay! Fireworks! So Francis Lawrence is still set to direct. We still don't have any casting news, but hopefully that is coming very soon. I'm really excited to see who they'll have playing all these roles, and more importantly, I want to know if Donald Sutherland will come back to do like a cameo and credit scene. But yeah, if everything goes according to plan, then we could have the movie by late 2023-ish, maybe early 2024. Either way, we're getting a movie, guys. We're getting a new Hunger Games movie, and it's so freaking exciting. I can't wait to see a Hunger Games movie in theaters again. But yeah, just like with the upcoming Percy Jackson series and the Shadow and Bone season, I apologize to everyone in my life for how insufferable I will become. I'm already planning to see Ballad the day it comes out, possibly a midnight premiere if I can manage it, because I was lucky enough to be able to see like all the Hunger Games movies, but I have never been to like a Hunger Games movie midnight premiere, and I want to try to do it this time. And I want to show up in like a Lucy Gray inspired outfit. I don't know, it's still a long way away, but it doesn't change how excited I am. Anyway, back to talking about the actual Ballad book. So this week, Coriolanus and Lucy Gray get to know each other better. New ideas for the Hunger Games are presented. Sejanus proves to be a better person than most of the other mentors, no surprise to anyone. And we get the lyrics to a famous song in the Hunger Games fandom. Woo! So just to recap from last week, last episode, not last week. You guys know what I'm trying to say. But to recap, the Snows are having money problems. New property taxes may cause them to lose their home. Coriolanus is assigned the District 12 girl to mentor. Lucy Gray makes a memorable entrance involving a song and a snake. Coriolanus meets Lucy Gray at the train station. He hitches a ride with the other tributes and ends up at the monkey house. So with all that said, let's not waste any time and dive right into chapter 4. So Coriolanus starts off this chapter in a very awkward position. He and the tributes are trapped in a cage at the zoo in what used to be the monkey house. And Coriolanus is understandably very anxious. Being trapped somewhere that exposed and on display sounds like my worst nightmare. And to make it even more awkward, there's already some people, kids and adults, there staring at him, and the Capitol News to just make it even better. By the way, the slogan for the Capitol News is, "If you don't see it here, it didn't happen." That kind of slogan feels very on brand for the Capitol. On the surface, it's like a fun, catchy slogan, which is obviously what they want. And the first time I read that book, that's what I picked up on. That detail just kind of went over my head. But upon looking at it again, it just feels very, I don't know how to call it, a brainwashy. That's not a real word, but it's the only way I can think of to describe it. Because, of course, the Capitol would only want its citizens to listen to their news source and, ignore any independent sources. And this idea is obviously explored on a deeper level in the original trilogy, especially in Mockingjay, if I'm remembering correctly. So we'll dive into that more once we get to that book in the series. But it's just such a small detail, but it says so much about the Capitol. I just found that really fascinating. So that's my first tangent of the day. So the only thing Coriolanus can do is just kind of sit there calmly and wait to be rescued because he doesn't want to look like an idiot on national TV, and doesn't want to become infamous by being trapped and panicking in the zoo like he would become an internet meme in our culture today. And some people start to recognize him because I think he was wearing his school uniform, and he's part of like the Capitol elite. So people recognize him and they're like, "Oh my God, dude, you okay? You need help?" And Corio just kind of sits there and judging them, wondering why they're not at work or school. And none of the other tributes try to attack him again, but they do haunt him. And as he's like kind of panicking, Lucy Gray tells him to own it and basically just act confident, which I feel is a pretty important life lesson. Like especially like after you're done with college and you just don't know what to do anymore. Like whatever you decide to do, just do it with confidence. And for those who don't know, I love theater. Whenever I go, and I still love to do it for fun. So whenever I go to like an audition at like a community theater or something, especially when it's a company that I've never worked with before and I'm meeting with for the first time, just do everything with confidence, especially on like dance calls for musicals. I'm not a strong dancer, but I just go into my dance calls with confidence. Just fail with confidence. I think one of my professors said that to me. But anyway, so Lucy Gray, she puts a rose in her hair. Coriolanus notes that she always seems to be improving her appearance, which is about right for her. And again, this just speaks to how Lucy Gray's always ready to give a performance. Like, she understands the importance of her appearance, and I feel like this ultimately helps to connect Corio and Lucy, since they both understand that importance. And it's clearly shown in the next scene between the two of them. They kind of put on a nice showy performance for the audience and the cameras. Coriolanus takes her hand like she's an elegant lady, and she says, "My left side is better." And Coriolanus purposely positions them somewhere away from the camera, so they have to come to them. So again, everything they do is very calculated in this moment to like get the audience on their side and get them to like him and Lucy Gray to be invested, because that's supposed to be the point of having the mentors and having the interview night. And Lucy Gray smiling and waving and acting happy to be there, even though they're gonna potentially watch her get slaughtered in a few days. And she's obviously very nervous because it says in the book that like Coriolanus can feel her squeezing his hand very tightly, which, yeah, I would be nervous in this situation too. Like, dear God, I would have fallen apart. She's handling it very well. First ones to approach her are a group of children. The first boy to speak is named Pontius. Don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but that's his name. And he even shakes Lucy Gray's hand. But again, Lucy Gray is giving a very careful performance in this moment, because she knows she has to appear as non-threatening as possible, because everyone, especially the kids in the Capitol, have this like barbaric view of the districts. So she does her best to appear non-threatening, and even make sure to like keep her hands in the bar so it doesn't look like she's coming out to be threatening or whatever. And she has a cute exchange with the kids. One asks her about their snake, and overall the crowd gradually starts to warm up to Lucy Gray. And Coriolanus has this really interesting quote on page 52 where he doesn't say it out loud, he thinks to himself. He says, people were easy to manipulate when it came to their children. A tactic I'm sure he uses many, many times in his life over the years, given his future and where he ends up in life and how involved with the games he becomes. And he's impressed with Lucy Gray because she seems to understand like this concept almost instinctively. And his easiest way to impress a crowd is to be good with kids, which is why that I think cast members at Disney World are some of the most talented people out there, because obviously a huge part of their job is interacting with kids, talking to them, answering their questions, and they often like have to improvise, and always in a way where their answers are in character and make sense. And yeah, they're really talented people, and I don't think they get enough credit for what they do. So anyway, after the exchange with their kids, a Capitol reporter named Lepidus Malmsey, Lepidus Malmsey. I probably butchered that name. They'll correct me in the movie if this is a character in the movie. Anyway, Lepidus comes over and starts chatting with Lucy Gray, and I want to read some of that conversation out loud. So this is at the bottom of page 52. That's page 62, Alyson. I can read numbers. So it starts with Lucy Gray speaking. "And who might you be?" she asked. "I'm Lepidus with the Capitol News," he said, flashing a grin. "So, Lucy, you're the tribute from District 12? "I'm Lucy Gray, and I'm not really from 12, she said. "My people are Covey, musicians by trade. We just took a wrong turn one day, and we were obliged to say, 'Oh, so what district are you from, then?' asked Lepidus. "No district in particular. We move from place to place as the fancy takes us." Lucy Gray caught herself. "Well, we used to anyway, before the peacekeepers rounded us up a few years back." But you're District 12 citizens," he insisted. "If you say so." Lucy Gray's eyes drifted back to the crowd as if she was in danger of being bored. The reporter could feel her slipping away. "Your dress has been a big hit in the capital." "Has it?" "Well, the Covey love color, and me more than most. But this was my mama's dress, so it's extra special to me," she said. "She in District 12, Lepidus asked. "Just her bones, darling, just her pearly white bones." So, important things we learn about Lucy Gray in this exchange. One, she's not truly from District 12, and this is the first time the Covey is mentioned by name. They were obviously, like she said, a group of traveling musicians, and they just happened to be in 12 when peacekeepers were rounded up. I'm assuming this is closer to the end of the war, and you know, we learn that her mother's dead. Naturally, she's a YA heroine. It's required that at least one of her parents be dead before the start of the story. That's how it goes. And eventually, the peacekeepers do come to collect Coriolanus, and they are not amused. They take him back to the academy, and they drop him off at the high biology lab. And as he waits, he can see like the mentor tribute assignment listed on the wall. You can find the list on page 56. And this list is shown like throughout the book, and later on we actually get the names of all the tributes as well as all the mentors, which I just think is really cool. I'm not going to read all of them out loud. You can go see yourself, because that would be really time consuming. But Coriolanus, he hates the fact that his name is at the bottom, like an afterthought, because he can't handle not being important, because he has a fairly fragile ego. And he kind of gives off vibes of someone who wouldn't like it if one of his peers has more Instagram followers than him or something. I don't know if anyone else picked up on that. It's like a very weirdly specific thing, but it's just what I just get that vibe from him. So when he's finally called inside the lab, there are two people waiting for him, Dean Highbottom and the worst person ever to exist, and I hate. So this person is Dr. Volumnia Gall. She's the head game maker and the mastermind behind the Capitol's Experimental Weapons Division. And this is like the first image we get. This is how we're introduced to her. She's teasing a caged rabbit with a metal rod. She's poking the rabbit until it takes the rod and snaps it in two. The rabbit's jaw, notably, was modified to have pit bull strength, And this is the first time we get her weird catchphrase, hippity hoppity. And she's unnerved Coriolanus since he was a kid. I mean, I would be unnerved by this woman too. Like, she seems to enjoy, like, taunting that rabbit, which just... Ugh. Yeah, so when Coriolanus was a kid, they went on, like, a class field trip when he was 9, and they met her there, and they watched as she melted flesh off a lab rat with a laser. And, asked them if they have any pets they want to get rid of. Like, it was a funny joke. Like, woman, what the heck? What is wrong with you? You just essentially kill an animal in a pretty brutal way right in front of some kids. Yeah. She be crazy. So, just everything about this woman is unnerving, and there's so much more to unpack later on in this book. And we'll get into all that later. So her first, and she likes to do weird, creepy rhymes. Like on page 58, she says, "Hippity hoppity, how was the zoo? You fell in a cage, and your tribute did too." And Corio's like, "What?" And he just kind of responds to go along with it, because what else do you do in that situation? And he's like, "We did. We fell in a cage, and we landed on stage." And Gall compliments him. Thinks he would make a good game maker one day. Says he's got, like, the instinct or whatever that means. And Coriolanus at first doesn't think much of it, because he doesn't think being a game maker is like a quote-unquote real job or whatever. Oh boy. Just give it 20 years. It'll be a hot commodity job. Don't you worry, dude. Weird calling Corio dude. So Gall then goes to ask him, "Hey, why'd you go into the cage?" Because I think most people would ask that. And we, the reader, know it was kind of an accident. And at that moment, his words, "own it," come back to him, and he tries to make it sound like it was done on purpose. And he goes on to explain that he doesn't think that his tribute has a real chance of winning, but she's, appealing in a quote-unquote scruffy sort of way. So he's using her to engage the audience, since that's supposed to be the point this year, to his understanding. So to reach the audience, he goes where the cameras are. And, of course, time for another reading on page 59. Fair warning, because I think a lot of the scenes with Gall are really fascinating, despite how much I hate her, and I think it's some of where Suzanne's writing is the strongest. So fair warning, there will be quite a few readings in scenes where she's involved. So on page 59, I need to mark these things, gosh dang it. Here we go. So toward the bottom of page 59, Dr. Gall starts saying, yes, there's no Hunger Games without the audience. She turns to the dean. "You see, Casca, this one took the initiative. He understands the importance of keeping the games alive." Dean Highbottom squinted at him skeptically. "Does he? Or is he just showboating for a better grade? What do you think the purpose of the Hunger Games is, Coriolanus?" "To punish the districts for the rebellion," Coriolanus said, without hesitation. "Yes, but punishment could take a myriad of forms," said the dean. "Why the Hunger Games?" Coriolanus opened his mouth and then hesitated. Why the Hunger Games? Why not just drop bombs or cancel food shipments or stage executions on the steps of the district justice buildings? His mind jumped to Lucy Gray kneeling at the bars of the cage, engaging the children, the thawing of the crowd. They were connected in some way that he couldn't quite articulate, because of the children, how they mattered to people. "How do they matter?" Dean Highbottom pressed. "People love children," said Coriolanus. But even as the words came out of his mouth, he questioned them. So it's interesting, because, like, the whole purpose of the Hunger Games, I don't know, it seems like pointless in a way to him. I'm not quite sure how to articulate that, but because as he said, they could easily punish the districts in any number of ways. So it's interesting how, like, at this point, like, Coriolanus and supposedly like other capital citizens can't quite grasp the point of the games, which is obviously very different mindset by Katniss's time, because they all love the games, probably don't question it the way some other people do at this point in time. And so after this, we learn that via narration that during the war, Coriolanus was abused and starved in multiple ways, and not just from the rebels, so hence why he's questioning the thought he has of, do people really care about children? So, like, once when he was a kid, a peacekeeper bruised his jaw when he accidentally wandered too close to the president's mansion, and then, as further insult, the peacekeeper took his cabbage. And another time, he collapsed on the street when he was sick with the swan flu. And please tell me I'm not the only one who, when I first read that word, I thought it said swine flu. Anyway. And no one stopped to help him. And the only reason he survived is because Tigress found him, and she was even sick herself when she did. So Tigress, in conclusion, is a goddamn superhero. And ultimately, Coriolanus doesn't really understand people's love for children, calls it a fickle thing. And I'd be interested to know how he viewed, like, his own children and grandchildren in the future. In Mockingjay, it's mentioned that he has a granddaughter, and in the movies, we do see a bit of their relationship. Side note, I love all the stuff they added of him in the movies. I think it was fantastic. And I also, like, if I ever got the chance to interview Donald Sutherland, the two things I'd probably ask him are, like, how Snow viewed his granddaughter and his family, like what kind of relationship he thinks they had, and also like how much of his backstory he got from Suzanne when they were making the movies, because I think like obviously she had an idea of his backstory, and then when she sat down to write this, all those ideas became more concrete. But I just would love to know like how much Donald Sutherland knew before making this movie. And anyway, moving on. So we get an interesting comment from Highbottom. He calls the Hunger Games a failed experiment, and then Gaul snaps back and says, "It is if no one watches." But this is such an interesting comment coming from the person who is credited with creating the Hunger Games. And every time I read this book, because I've reread it a couple times now, like Highbottom becomes a more interesting character to me. I think at the end I'll do like a full deep dive into his character, like with it, and like give you guys an explanation of all my thoughts about him, because it really isn't until the epilogue that we fully understand him. So again, that's all coming later. So anyway, then Gaul leaves to go see her mutts, because she loves her mutts. And on page 61, she mentions something wonderful going on with the reptiles. Foreshadowing a little bit. We know this will be important later in the worst way possible. And so after she leaves, Highbottom and Coriolanus have a lovely chat. No conversation between them is ever lovely. Sorry. So Highbottom essentially calls Coriolanus out on his BS. He knows Corio didn't go into the cage on purpose, because he's a teacher. Teachers are good at spotting when students are lying about stuff, especially English teachers. Oh boy, they know when you haven't read the book. They know. So he gives Coriolanus a demerit for endangering a student himself, and then Highbottom puts drops of morphling on his tongue to remind us that he's addicted to the stuff, and the chapter ends by him warning Coriolanus that 3 demerits will get him expelled, because just like Snape has it out for Harry, Highbottom has it out for Coriolanus. So that's the end of that chapter. So we'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back to talk about chapter 5. And we're back. So, where we left off, Coriolanus, he's obviously very displeased with the fact that he got a demerit. He'd never been officially reprimanded before. And he leaves before Highbottom can give him another demerit, and he's very aggravated right now. But have no fear, he feels much better once his friends and family, and even some strangers, shower him with compliments. So no worries, everyone. His ego has been boosted again. And after dinner, he goes right to the zoo to see Lucy Gray. Wants her to sing again so that she'll draw the cameras back. And as he re-enters the zoo, starts to feel nostalgic for the place. Most of the cages are empty now because most of the animals died or couldn't be taken care of during the war. And the only animals currently thriving right now are the rats. Love them. I don't know about you guys, but I do not like rats. Like, or maybe it's kind of because I had a bad experience with a rat once. Like my last year of college, I was staying in an apartment, and somehow a rat got in, and I found it at like 1 a.m. when I was in the bathroom, doing my thing. And yeah, that's not a place where I want to find a rat, because all of a sudden the trash can started moving. I'm like, what the fuck? It was a rat, and needless to say, I ran out of the bathroom screaming. My poor roommate woke up. He was like, "What is wrong?" He somehow caught the rat. Anyway, not to relive that memory. Continuing on. So there is a crowd of about 100 people at the zoo. Lepidus and the cameras are there, and also Sejanus is there, trying to give sandwiches to the tributes, but they won't take any because they don't trust him. And Coriolanus is immediately offended because he thinks Sejanus is trying to upstage him instead of, it doesn't cross his mind that Sejanus just genuinely wants to feed hungry kids. But another reason Coriolanus is upset by the gesture is because Sejanus is doing something Coriolanus can't do because his family, they can barely afford to feed themselves currently. Although, he has to keep up appearances, so he still acts casual when Sejanus calls him over. And a little girl nearby calls the tributes animals because she's pointing the "Do not feed animals" sign to Sejanus and is saying, hey, don't feed them because they're animals, because they're from the districts. And I don't know, it's just interesting because I don't think this girl's like old enough to remember the war the way like Coriolanus and the kids his age can, but clearly like that hatred and like trauma have been kind of passed on to her, so she has such like a strong reaction to these tributes, and it's really sad. But anyway, Sejanus then asked Coriolanus if he can get Lucy Gray to come over and take a sandwich, hoping that it'll convince the others to eat something, because apparently Sejanus is the only one to think of feeding these poor kids. And again, he's the only one who's like kind of showing genuine worry right now, at least that we can see, because he realizes they're not being properly fed or cared for. But Coriolanus hesitates, wondering if he'll get another demerit. But he's not endangering a student this time, so should be fine. But, still doesn't want to share the spotlight with Sejanus. And because, he views the zoo as his show and him and Lucy Gray being the stars. So he brings a couple sandwiches over to where Lucy Gray is, lays them on a handkerchief, almost like he's setting up a picnic. And fun fact we learned from this moment, his grandmam instilled in him to always leave the house with a clean handkerchief, because the Snows may be about to lose their home and can barely feed themselves every day, but gosh darn it, they will have clean hankies. I don't know why, I just find it kind of amusing. And so Lucy Gray asks Coriolanus to eat with her. He hesitates because he's worried it'll cross some kind of line, because she's beneath him because she's district. Ooh, the scandal. But he didn't really eat much at dinner and skip lunch, so his hunger, like any teenage boy, gets the best of him, and he eats the second sandwich. And this ultimately convinces the other tributes to take food from Sejanus, Well, all except Marcus, who's Sejanus' tribute, and Marcus is a very stubborn person. And, like, Sejanus is literally begging him to take the food, but he won't. And Lucy Gray does notice that this whole exchange feels pretty personal. But don't worry, everyone. The sandwich does not go to waste. The little boy who wanted to kill Coriolanus in the truck takes it. And when the news team tries to talk to Sejanus, he brushes them off and disappears into the crowd because, unlike Coriolanus, Sejanus actually cares about feeding the tributes and not just, going there to get attention for himself or try to benefit himself. And this is further proven because the next moment, Coriolanus aligns himself with Sejanus for his own benefit. He believes that being considered one of Sejanus' friends will offer him some kind of protection from High Bottom, since Mr. Plinth is responsible for many of the Academy's construction and rebuilding, and even High Bottom isn't crazy enough to go against the person responsible for paying the bills to fix the school. So Lepidus then asks questions, or he then questions why Sejanus bothered to bring food, since, surely the capital would feed the tributes. One would think. Well, you're wrong, Lepidus, since Lucy Gray confirms in the next moment that the tributes haven't been fed at all. Last time she ate a full meal was the night before the reaping, so poor thing has been without a proper meal in 3 days. So Lucy Gray turns to the cameras and encourages everyone to bring food. And on page 67, she says, "No fun watching the games if we're all too weak to fight, don't you think?" And that's very obvious to us now, because in the original trilogy, the tributes are all very well fed in the days leading up to the games, and they're treated like celebrities because, the game makers want them to be in good shape so the games are entertaining. But this just shows at this point, in time, how, the games aren't as celebrated, and, with the war still so fresh in everyone's mind, the people from the district are, really, really seen as other, and they're not treated like people, to the point where they don't think to feed the tributes. What do they think? People from the districts don't need to eat? Is that how dehumanized they are? I don't know. It's just so weird and dumb that that the capital doesn't think to feed the tributes. They want the audience, they plan the interview night because they want the audience to be engaged with the Hunger Games, but you don't feed the tributes. Some of them might die of starvation before the games start. Anyway, it's just so weird and messed up. Though, side note, Lucy Gray says she loves to eat sweet things. Same. And I'm kind of craving some cake right now. Anyway, moving on before I make myself hungry again. So Lucy Gray asks people to bring food and kind of puts Lepidus in a really tough position, because he obviously doesn't want to appear cruel by discouraging people from bringing the tributes food, especially since, they haven't eaten in days. But on the other hand, he doesn't want to make it sound like he's condemning the capital in any way, because, to agree with Lucy Gray and tell people to bring food would be to criticize the capital for neglecting the tributes. And we all know it doesn't take much to offend the capital and to have them punish you in harsh ways. Anyway, so Lepidus scurries off to talk to someone else about less controversial things. Coriolanus apologizes to Lucy Gray for not bringing food, and the two of them just continue to eat and watch reporters fail to get other tributes to talk. So then Lucy Gray starts asking relevant questions, like what Coriolanus gets out of all of this as a mentor. And Corio does feel a bit embarrassed and feels a little uncomfortable by the question. And because at that moment, the reality that Lucy Gray will very likely be dead in a few days hits him. And he's starting to see her more as a person. Newsflash, dude, she's always been a person. Because, before he'd just been viewing her as his contender, a filly in the race. But anyway, to answer her question, Coriolanus tells Lucy Gray that he's not entirely sure what he'll end up getting out of this, because they've never had mentors before. But he does encourage her to sing more, since then people might bring her food. And then something really interesting happens. We actually get a moment of Koryo being a normal, vulnerable person with someone. He lets it slip to Lucy Gray that he doesn't have much food at home, something that would be unthinkable for him to say with his academy peers, since it would ruin his reputation of being a wealthy capital elite. And this naturally surprises Lucy Gray, because she, like us, has always just assumed that people in the capital always have plenty of food and generally have easy lives. And she seems genuinely interested in what he has to say, thus he feels more comfortable answering her questions and telling her more about him. Tells her about the time he ate half a jar of paste to cope with the hunger during the war. And I strongly believe that at this moment the performance has dropped. Lucy Gray is now being herself with him. One, because I believe the revelation that not everyone in the capital is as well off as she thought would catch her off guard. And because there are no cameras pointed at her at this moment, so she's allowed to drop the performance a bit. And we know from an earlier chapter that Coriolanus does seem to have a sense of when she's performing or not, because at the train station when they met, he picks up on the fact that she's giving him a private performance. So this is when I think that Lucy Gray starts to think that maybe she can trust this guy. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work out for her. But anyway, we're not there yet. So after that meaningful exchange, it's announced that the zoo will be closing in 15 minutes. They say goodbye, good night, and Coriolanus leaves her his handkerchief. Aww. So Lucy Gray, she's clearly missing home, and it's hitting her that she'll probably never see home again. And it's very sad. So as Coriolanus walks away, Lucy Gray starts singing, and just about everyone stops to listen, and she's singing the Valley song. And I just wrote this part in my notes in all caps, Everlark Feels. So for anyone who doesn't know, for some reason, so the importance of the Valley song is that we learn in the Hunger Games that when Katniss and Peeta were kids on their first day of school, that's when Peeta notices Katniss for the first time, because his dad pointed her out, because their parents knew each other. But at music assembly, someone asked, "Hey, who knows the Valley song?" And Katniss raised her hand, sang the song, and that was the day that Peeta started having a crush on her. So the song is a very big deal in the fandom, obviously, especially if you're in Katniss and Peeta shipper like me. And we've never gotten the actual lyrics for it, because in the original trilogy, the only lyrics for songs we get are the Meadow song and the Hanging Tree. So it was really cool to see this song in the book. And also, of course, Maya Wynn and other creators on YouTube have made their own interpretations of the song. So I'll link Maya's video and a couple other videos in the show notes so you guys can check them out. Anyway, so while Lucy Gray is singing, Coriolanus is reminded of his mother, because she used to sing him lullabies when he was little. And then this is when we learn how his mother died exactly. So it was during when the city was under siege because of the rebels. There were major air raids had started, and they had immobilized the city. And his mom is pregnant at this time, and she goes into labor, and she has worse timing than Snow White from Once Upon a Time. Both these women are just have to give birth during a crisis, apparently. So, but while she went into labor, something went wrong. They couldn't get her to a hospital because, again, the city was immobilized because of the air raids. And Coriolanus just remembers there being a lot of blood, and, sadly both the mom and the baby, who would have been his sister, didn't make it. And then his dad's death was shortly after that, so really bad year for the Snows. So Coriolanus, he was more upset with the death of his father than his mother. He keeps his mom's compact in his nightstand, and he says it still smells like her, like roses, because the Snows are obsessed with roses. And he takes it out whenever he needs to feel calm. And Coriolanus then thinks of Lucy Gray and wonders if she lost her parents during the war, and if it was also the rebels' fault in some way, because she didn't seem very attached to District 12 since she never refers to it as home. So, back in present, Lucy Gray finishes the song and Sejanus appears. He and Corio chat, and we get a glimpse inside of Sejanus' thoughts. So he says that ever since the reaping, Sejanus, he keeps imagining himself as one of the tributes, which is perfectly understandable. He's from District 2 after all, and the only reason he's safe from the reaping is because his father was rich enough to buy them out of 2. And then we learn that Sejanus and Marcus were in fact classmates back when the Plinths still lived in 2. So, yeah, the odds are not in Sejanus' favor in terms of who he's mentoring. Because when they were kids, Marcus helped a young Sejanus once when he just injured his hand in a doorway or something. And as far as we know, that was their only meaningful interaction that they had with each other. But it was important because it's important to know that the Plinths were not liked back in 2, probably because Mr. Plinth is rich and sided with the capital during the war. So Sejanus, we can assume, probably didn't have a lot of friends, or if any. So it's safe to assume that Marcus may have been one of the few people to show some kindness towards Sejanus. So it just makes the whole situation even worse and heartbreaking for both Marcus and Sejanus. And meanwhile, in the background, a bale of hay gets dropped in the cage, and the two boys fight over it. But neither of them get it because Marcus comes over and throws both of them across the cage and takes the hay for himself to sleep on. Total power move. But this is a small but significant moment because it does establish how much of a physical threat Marcus is or will be once he's in the arena. And now Coriolanus is 99% sure that Marcus will win. So Coriolanus voices that out loud, that he's pretty sure Marcus will win, and that is when Sejanus offers to trade tributes. Because he doesn't care about winning, and it'll be easier if he's mentoring Lucy Gray, because he doesn't know her the way he knows Marcus. It'll still suck for him, but at least it'll be a little easier. And Coriolanus almost says yes. Because this is everything he could want. He wanted a tribute from 1 or 2 to begin with. And this is his best chance at getting a prize to go to university. But then he stops himself. Now, he doesn't just want to win. He wants to win in a way that'll be historic. Because winning with Marcus would be considered predictable and easy. But if he wins with Lucy Gray, the biggest underdog, because she's from 12, the joke district, then it would be truly great. Because was the point to win or have the most memorable tribute? And I mean, based on her entrance alone, I'd say so far Lucy Gray is the most memorable. And he also can't imagine telling her or the audience that he dumped her for Marcus. It would be a bad look for him. And so now I will read the last paragraph of the chapter that kind of just highlights all of this. There was one more consideration. He had something Sejanus Plinth wanted, and wanted badly. Sejanus had already usurped his position, his inheritance, his clothes, his candy, his sandwiches, and the privilege due a Snow. Now he was coming for his apartment, his spot at university, his very future, and he had the gall to be resentful of his good fortune, to reject it, to consider it a punishment even. If having Marcus as a tribute made Sejanus squirm, then good. Let him squirm. Lucy Gray was one thing belonging to Coriolanus that he would never, ever get. Sorry, my friend, he said mildly, but I think I'll keep her. So, yikes, a lot going on there. So, earlier in the previous chapters, Coriolanus called Lucy Gray a gift, and now he's starting to think of her as his property. And that whole passage just really made me feel uncomfortable with that. So, yeah, ultimately, as we know, he declines the offer and sticks with Lucy Gray, partially out of pride, because again, it would be a historic win, but also, I think out of spite, like, toward Sejanus and his just possessiveness toward Lucy Gray. Because, like the passage said, Coriolanus views Sejanus as someone who's trying to take everything that he feels he's entitled to. So Lucy Gray will be just the one thing he won't let Sejanus have, almost like a bratty child not wanting to share his favorite toy. Alright, so with all that said, I think it's time for another quick break. Alright, we're back. I got some tea with honey in it, so I will be stopping periodically to take a sip. And I scrolled through TikTok for a bit. You guys know that, like, all those sounds that's going around between, like, the beef of Elmo and Rocco? I just saw one that was used for, Ron as Elmo, Hermione as Zoe, and Rocco as Crookshanks the cat. Anyway, it's fun when I try to explain to people who aren't on TikTok as often as I am about the whole, like, beef between Elmo and Rocco. Anyway, I shouldn't be laughing as much as that. So anyway, where were we? Oh, okay, so where we left off. Sejanus asks Coriolanus if they'll trade tributes, and Coriolanus says no out of spite. So, Coriolanus, he relishes in the moment of seeing Sejanus' disappointment, and then has the audacity to act like he's doing this because it's in everyone's best interest, as if, we didn't just read your thoughts a second ago, Corio. Don't act like I don't know how you're already looking at Lucy Gray like something you don't want to share. Very rude. So Coriolanus points out that Mr. Plinth and the Academy wouldn't be pleased if they switched tributes and it would also crush Lucy Gray because she's grown attached to him. Ugh. So Sejanus apologizes for putting Corio in that position. He wasn't thinking, etc., blah, blah, blah. And then Sejanus calls the Hunger Games evil, rightfully so, and he says he needs to find a way to get out of it somehow. This confession from Sejanus makes Coriolanus uncomfortable, since, he would kill to have Sejanus' privileges. And when Coriolanus says that someone else would probably trade with him, Sejanus says that Corio is the only one he would trust with Marcus. You should reconsider who you trust, Sejanus. Just saying. So they both depart for the night. And Sejanus says he's in trouble when he gets home because, by giving food to the tributes, in his father's eyes, he has publicly aligned himself with the districts. And the Grandmam also disapproves of Coriolanus' picnic with Lucy Gray, says dining with her indicated that he considers her an equal, which is, of course, unacceptable in the Grandmam's eyes. And on page 77, she has this really outrageous claim that people from the districts, they drink water only because it doesn't rain blood. That's crazy, if I'd ever heard one. And at the top of page 78, there's this brief but kind of interesting conversation between Corio and the Grandmam. He says, Lucy Gray is different. She took my side in the truck when the others wanted to attack me, and she had my back in the monkey house too. The Grandmam held her ground. Would she have bothered you if you weren't her mentor? Of course not. She's a wily little thing who began to manipulate you the minute you met. Tread carefully, my boy. That's all I'm saying. So I think this is Suzanne's way of saying, don't underestimate Lucy Gray, and that she's smarter than we may give her credit for. We all just, have known Snow to be this, smart and manipulative person. But while we're all focused on him, we can overlook Lucy Gray's intelligence. I know I did for most of the book the first time I read it. Now, rereading it, I don't know, her intelligence just seems more obvious. And this is another side tangent no one asked for, but I just think that in general, as a society, we have a tendency to underestimate the intelligence of artists, especially performers, because part of performing is being able to engage with the audience and know what kind of audience you have, especially for things like stand-up or even just performing music the way Lucy Gray does. And we know Lucy Gray is a successful performer back home, so clearly she's smart enough to be able to read people and interact with them in a way to get them to like her, to bring them on to her side. So maybe the Grandmam has a point that as much as Coriolanus is going to use Lucy Gray for his own gain, she could very well be using him. But, her situation is obviously, more understandable and sympathetic because Coriolanus purposely chose to become a mentor and his life isn't directly in danger, whereas Lucy Gray, on the other hand, did not choose any of this. Heck, she didn't even really choose to live in District 12. And her life is very much on the line. So, yeah, her quote-unquote manipulation is a bit more understandable and excusable. But anyway, end of that tangent. I'm going to take another sip of my tea. So, Coriolanus goes to bed and takes out his mother's compact. And small detail to note, he does look like his father, but kind of wishes he took after his mother, but ultimately decides probably better to take after his father because perhaps his mother just wasn't tough enough for the world. And then he goes to sleep dreaming of Lucy Gray. Gag. I literally in my notes wrote gag in parentheses. So he wakes up the next morning and Tigress is baking bread pudding. And the one thing that me and Corio can agree on is that Tigress needs more sleep. But she also can't sleep because of the games and Coriolanus being involved with them and kind of has her on edge. And I say it's a fairly normal reaction. And she gives him some bread pudding to give to Lucy Gray. And Coriolanus goes to school. His peers congratulate him for the zoo stunt, well, everyone except Livia Cardew, because Livia Cardew is just determined not to have a good time. Or praise anyone, really. The mentors, they go to history class with Professor Demiglass, and they brainstorm ideas to make the games more engageable. And Sejanus then comes in and poses the question, hey, should we even be doing this in the first place? The answer is obviously no, they should not. But Demiglass, of course, dismisses the question and tells them to stay on topic. Classic teacher move. And Festus Creed, who is mentoring the District 4 girl, suggests that they make it law to watch the games. And the idea is, in the district, the punishment for not watching would be execution. And then in the capital, they would banish you to the districts for the first time. And then the second time, you don't watch, execution. Everyone laughs, ha ha ha, because they know Festus isn't being totally serious the way teenage boys do, I guess. So they start debating how exactly you would carry out a law like that. How would you know if someone had watched the games? And they also discuss less harsh punishments, like whipping in the districts, which is still a pretty brutal punishment. And then in the capital, just, loss of privileges or whatever. Yeah, and then this really interesting conversation happens. So naturally, it's time for another reading. So it starts toward the bottom of page 81 with Clemencia saying, the real problem is it's sickening to watch, said Clemencia, so people avoid it. Sejanus jumps in. Of course they do. Who wants to watch a group of children kill each other? Only a vicious, twisted person. Human beings may not be perfect, but we're better than that. How do you know? Said Livia snippishly. And how does someone from the district have any idea what we want to watch in the capital? You weren't even here during the war. Sejanus fell silent, unable to deny it. Because most of us are basically decent people, said Lysistrata Vickers, folding her hands neatly in her notebook. Most of us don't want to watch other people suffer. We watched worse things during the war and after, Coriolanus reminded her. There had been some bloody stuff broadcast over the airways during the dark days, and many a brutal execution after the Treaty of Treason had been signed. But we had a real stake in that, Corio, said Arachne Crane. We were watching our enemies die. I mean, rebel scum and whatnot. Who cares about these kids one way or another? Possibly their families, said Sejanus. You mean a handful of nobodies in the districts? So what? Arachne boomed. Why should the rest of us care which one of them wins? Livia looked at Sejanus. I know I don't. Like, this is going to sound weird to say, but I kind of feel a little bad for these kids at this part, because at least, like, the way I read this scene is their hatred toward the districts is like a sort of trauma response, because they were so young when the war was going on, when the rebels invaded their home, so it's easy for them to see the rebels as the bad guys. The hatred doesn't necessarily come from this place of pure evil. And this obviously doesn't completely absolve them for who they potentially become in the future. Corio. Since pretty much all of them are children of capital elites and will become powerful adults in the future, and, you know, they don't do, as far as we know, they don't really do anything to change or help the future tributes, but I know, like, this moment, even though they're, like, obviously being, like, awful, especially Livia, like, this kind of thing, like, humanizes them a bit more, and I just found it really interesting to read. Anyway, so after that, the idea of betting comes up when Festus said he'd be more invested in a dogfight, especially if he was betting on it. So Coriolanus hops on board with the idea that, hey, betting should be a part of this, and if the idea is a success, he'd want to be remembered as the one who brought betting into the Hunger Games, because, of course he does. He's obsessed with being remembered and making a legacy for himself. So after lunch, the mentors have their first official meeting with their tributes in Heavensby Hall, which we know from the original trilogy is a little Easter egg to Plutarch Heavensby. And the mentors are all given like a sheet of paper that's like a questionnaire, an icebreaker for their tribute, and also function as like records, because in the past very few records of the tributes had been kept. Again, very different in the future. So Coriolanus is probably the only one who's excited and completely at ease to meet his tribute, and he wants to see Lucy Gray again. So the tributes are brought into Heavensby Hall and chained to their desks, and the mentors only get 15 minutes with them, and Coriolanus does do the bare minimum and asks the peacekeeper if Lucy Gray can be unchained, but naturally the answer is no. And Lucy Gray tells him that only a few people came by the zoo that morning, and she got an apple, which was more than most. And then that's when he gives her the bread pudding, and what do you know, turns out to be her favorite food, and naturally she gets emotional and misses home. And Coriolanus wants to comfort her, but he really can't, because how exactly do you comfort someone who's going to go into a death arena? So they move on to the questionnaire, and Lucy Gray says, I love talking about myself. Side note, I think Lucy Gray would be a good, like, influencer content creator if she existed in our world. Like, have some kind of, like, music YouTube channel or something. So, things we learn about Lucy Gray in that moment. Both her parents are dead. Again, naturally, she's a YA heroine. She's got to be an orphan. She did have 2 older siblings, but they're also dead. So her living family are just a couple cousins and the Covey. She's not married. Flirts a little with Coriolanus when he asks that, like, why are you asking? So she says that an old man took in the 6 Covey kids in for a fee. Didn't really raise them, but didn't mess with them and could have been worse. In that he died the previous year from black lung, which at first I don't know why, but I thought was just like a made up thing for this book. But then I looked it up, and the black lung is actually like a legit thing. So just from a quick Google search, I learned that black lung is just when coal dust is inhaled, and over time, when someone's lungs are continuously exposed, it scars the lungs over time and impairs your ability to breathe, and is a common occurrence among coal miners. So yikes, probably how a lot of District 12 citizens die, because the capital doesn't really take care of them. I doubt they're on a good healthcare plan, like in the present day timeline that we know in the original trilogy. I think Katniss's mother is the best healthcare people got in District 12. So yikes. So we also learn that Lucy Gray, she's 16, so she's not old enough to work in the mines, but she doesn't go to school, so she entertains people for a living. And again, she reminds us that the peacekeepers had rounded them up toward the end of the war, likely, and that's why they had to stay in District 12. But luckily, the peacekeepers let them keep their instruments, and the peacekeepers are some of their best customers. And then Coriolanus asked her, which side her parents were on during the war. But Lucy Gray says they didn't take sides, they were just themselves. And then they notice that Sejanus is struggling with Marcus. And again, Sejanus tries to give him food, but Marcus won't take it. And a lot of other tributes are crying and not answering their questions. So Coriolanus suggests that Lucy Gray sing the night of the interview, but she doesn't see the point, since she couldn't get anything out of it, and because she sang the Valley song so she could get food, and then before that the Reaping song was just this spontaneous thing that she wanted to do, but she doesn't see the point in singing on interview night if she can't get anything out of it, which completely fair if you ask me. So the two of them, they have another kind of meaningful moment, and they connect over the fact that they're both orphans. Most of Coriolanus's classmates have at least one parent still alive, so they can't quite understand him in that way that Lucy Gray can. So it's kind of nice. Lucy Gray says that wearing her mom's dress is the only thing keeping her together. And Coriolanus notes to himself that he'll have to convince her later to sing, because if she does, it'll reflect better on him come interview night. And they continue chatting. And Coriolanus finds it easy to talk to her, possibly because she'll be dead in a few days, and everything he tells her will just die with her. Has anyone ever else done that thing where, I don't know, if you're sitting on the bus or something, and then somehow you start chatting up with a stranger, and you just start telling them, somewhat personal things about you, because you'll never see them again? I imagine, this is kind of what that's like for him. But anyway, so time's up. The tributes are going to be taken back to the zoo, and the mentors are going to go to the high biology lab, and Coriolanus hopes that Professor Gall will be there. And on their way to the lab, most of the other mentors are complaining because their tributes wouldn't talk. Arachne says hers just talked about butchering hogs, and because her tribute is from District 10. And then Arachne decides to try to make up a good story, since, she claims that District 10 is practically her second home. And we learned that before the war, Arachne's family had developed luxury hotels in vacation destinations, so hence she used to travel a lot, and brags about it still, even though she's been capital bound since the war like everyone else. Pliny Harrington, aka Pup, has the District 7 girl, and he said that she cried the whole time. Understandable reaction, I'd say. So when they get to the lab, Gall and Highbottom are there, and Gall's back with more of her weird rhymes. Coriolanus is happy because he's the only one getting praised, since he's the only one who was able to complete the questionnaire, although still tries to act humble, because again, gotta have a good appearance. Though even he has to admit that Lucy Gray still doesn't see the point in making an effort in the interview nights, because either way, all the tributes are going to end up in the arena. So naturally, since we have another scene with Dr. Gall, it's time for another reading. Surprise to no one. So, Gall singles Sejanus out as the boy who brought the sandwiches, and, Sejanus like, you were starving them, and Gall calls him a rebel sympathizer. And then this leads into Sejanus' little speech where he says, hardly rebels. Some of them were 2 years old when the war ended. The oldest were 8, and now that the war's over, they're just citizens of Panem, aren't they? Same as us. Isn't that what the anthem says the capital does? You give us light, you reunite. It's supposed to be everyone's government, right? That's the general idea. Go on, Dr. Gall encouraged him. Well, then it should protect everyone, said Sejanus. That's its number one job, and I don't see how making them fight to the death achieves that. Obviously you don't approve of the Hunger Games, said Gall. That must be hard for a mentor. That must interfere with your assignment. Sejanus paused for a moment. Then he sat up straight, seeming to steel himself and look her in the eye. Perhaps you should replace me and assign someone more worthy. There was an audible gasp from the classroom. Not on your life, boy, Dr. Gall chuckled. Compassion is the key to the games. Empathy is the thing we lack, right, Casca? She glanced at Dean Highbottom, but he only fiddled with a pen. Sejanus' face fell, but he didn't argue back. Coriolanus felt he'd ceded the battle, but could not believe he'd given up on the war. He was tougher than he looked, Sejanus Plinth. Imagine throwing a mentorship back in Dr. Gall's face. So, go Sejanus. So we learned that Gall wants the audience to feel passionate about the tributes the way that Sejanus is. Just maybe not in quite the same way. And so thank you, Sejanus, for calling out the fact that these kids have literally nothing to do with the war. And, as more time passes, the more kids they throw into these games, and the further away they are from being the ones who were alive during the war. Like, by the time Katniss goes into the arena, there's generations between her, so it's just stupid, and they're unnecessarily dragging this BS out. So then Gall suggests sending food into the arena, and Festus agrees that it'll get people involved, and he mentions Coriolanus suggesting that they put odds on the tributes, and this pleases Gall. Who cares? Gall then tells them to write a proposal on how the betting could work, and she and her team will consider it, and of course the proposal's due the next morning. She says that what young people lack in experience, they make up for in idealism, and this is when we learn that Highbottom came up with the idea for the Hunger Games when he was her student at university, and Highbottom kind of weakly argues that it was just theoretical, and Gall says things like that are until proven useful. And so the whole class gets assigned to write the proposal, and we learn that Coriolanus hates group projects, which is kind of relatable, and makes perfect sense for him. Because in group projects, I don't know about any of you guys listening, but they almost never go very well, and usually awkward miscommunication and someone who slacks off their work. But Corio hates the idea of his ideas being compromised in the name of collaboration, which a small detail, but I think says a lot about his character, because he's all about him and his ideas because he thinks he knows best. So the class votes on a committee to write the paper. Coriolanus, Clemencia, and Arachne are the ones chosen to write it, and they agree to meet at the zoo at 8 o'clock that night. Tigress makes a dinner for Coriolanus to take to Lucy Gray, cabbage soup with red beans, and decorated with herbs from the garden. So more people are at the zoo than from the previous day. His mentor status helps him get to the front of the crowd so he can see Lucy Gray. The Ring twins, who are mentoring the District 6 tributes, see him, and they even give up their seat since they already fed their tributes. Lucy Gray joins him and eats the food that he brings her, and plenty of people have brought food, but they're still nervous to approach the tributes. A little boy named Horace gives Lucy Gray a potato, and feels safer doing so because Coriolanus is there. And a little girl gives Lucy Gray a carrot. Pluribus Bell, who helped provide the Snows with food during the war, shows up and gives Lucy Gray a small can of milk for old time's sake, and compliments Lucy Gray's song at the reaping. At this point, the mood has shifted. Tributes are actually trying to get attention in the hopes of getting some food. A girl from 9 does a back handspring after someone gives her a bread roll. A boy from 10 juggles 3 walnuts, which is impressive because I can't even juggle one item. And Lucy Gray even says they look like a circus troupe. And tributes are now approaching their mentors who have food. Sejanus shows up with more food, but again, Marcus is being stubborn, which I respect his reasons for being stubborn and not wanting to take food from Sejanus, but I also have to wonder, dude, you haven't eaten in days. Where is he getting the food? Where is he getting food from? Is he okay? Anyway, so and then Lucy Gray and Coriolanus just have another kind of cute exchange where she says that she wished they could have met under different circumstances. On page 97, she plays out this whole cute scenario where it's he came to one of her shows and he loved it so much he came back the next night, and maybe they danced, and if only things were that simple, and if only Corio was actually the kind of person that kind of person. And the mood has become very festive. The tributes from 6 are dancing. The Ring twins are getting people to clap along. The crowd's gotten a bit closer. They're more relaxed, and a few of them are even chatting with the tributes now. And Coriolanus plans to ask Lucy Gray to sing at the end of the night because, he wants to ensure that she's the closing act. And I know, it just sounds like a very, we painted this very nice scene of almost like a party. And because this is a Hunger Games novel, though, naturally things can't stay nice forever. Gosh darn it, Suzanne. So, once again, Coriolanus is worried about his resources because he can't afford to buy Lucy Gray food during the games. Thinks that it should probably be a rule that mentors can't participate in the betting. That way, seems like a reasonable rule and it won't make him look bad during the games. And then he spots Arachne by the bars, laying out a picnic for her tribute. She has a loaf of bread, block of cheese, and grapes. An important thing to note is that grapes are, at that point, are considered a luxury. So and Coriolanus wonders, how does she afford that? So it's a sign that the travel industry might be picking up again, and a sign that the capital's economy or whatever is getting better. And Arachne cuts up a piece of bread and cheese, makes a cheese sandwich for her tribute, but doesn't give it to her right away and seems to be lecturing her. Not once, but twice, Arachne takes the sandwich out of the tribute's reach at the last minute and, just mocking her, making a show of it. And bad idea, and it's just cruel. Because, again, this girl from District 10, she hasn't eaten, really, and now you're just mocking her. And Lucy Gray even comments that she's playing with fire. And then Arachne has the audacity to eat the sandwich in front of the tribute. And I'm about to read what happens at the end of this chapter, and it's from reading that it's horrifying. And I'm not saying in any way Arachne deserves what happens to her. No one deserves that. But I will say she was also being an idiot, because this is her tribute. She even said earlier that her tribute talked about slaughtering hogs, and you're being mean. Because like Lucy Gray said, she was playing with fire. So, anyway. So, Lucy Gray says she's playing with fire. Arachne waved to the crowd and then took a bite of the sandwich herself. Coriolanus could see the tribute's face darkening, the muscles tightening in her neck. He could see something else, too. Her fingers sliding down the bar, darting out, circling the handle of the knife. He started to rise, opening his mouth to shout out a warning, but it was too late. In one movement, the tribute yanked Arachne forward and slit her throat. And that's how the chapter ends! Again, what the fudge, Suzanne? We were all having a nice time, and then this happens. Ah! Cause, it's at this point in the book where, the stakes and things just suddenly get more interesting. Because at this point, the first time I read it, I kind of, felt a bit of a lull. Because one of the most common complaints I hear about Ballad is that the pacing is slow or it's all over the place, which is fair. Like Hunger Games, the plot feels more, tight. I guess, one after the other, end of every chapter, boom, boom, boom. I need to read what happens next. And there are some moments in Ballad like that, and that ending is definitely one of them. And on that lovely note, that's the end. That's all we got for the day. I reached the end of my notes. So next time we'll be talking about chapter 7 to 10, and that will finish part 1. Woo! So I hope you guys have a great night. Don't forget to follow on Instagram the Instagram account if you're not following, and feel free to message or leave comments and any thoughts you have about upcoming chapters, because I'd love to share them here on the podcast. But yeah, with all that said, have a good night, guys. Bye.